Good morning. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarabeth Berk, and this is Becoming More Than Your Title because I am a lead researcher on this notion of hybrid professional identity. And that's a new concept, although hybrids have been in the workforce for decades, but it's new because we haven't talked about ourselves as being hybrid people, hybrid professionals in our work. And of course, with COVID and the pandemic, everything is going hybrid the last year, hybrid work and learning and events. But we don't always think about the people themselves, that we are crossing and combining, literally merging multiple work identities together to be the best at whatever we do. Many times we talk about this as being a jack of all trades or someone that's a gig worker, wears a lot of hats, maybe a multi-potentialite or multi-talented. And what we're really hitting on is that people do many things. Yet there's a segment of the workforce that's going beyond just wearing a lot of hats. They are literally integrating these multiple sides of their professional parts together. And in the sum of all of that, they are bigger, and that is their truest professional identity. I call it your hybridity. So I'm using this space and time on LinkedIn to dive into amazing stories with real people in very different walks of work and life about their hybridity. Both how did they learn that they were hybrids? How did they even know about this concept? And some people are more in an emerging place. They're just sort of getting started talking about it, thinking about it, using it. And other people are much further on that journey. I call them established hybrids. They're rocking and rolling. They are fully in their hybridity and owning it. And that's where I try and help people get to. Because when you know your hybrid professional identity and you can articulate it very clearly, suddenly you can communicate your true value in the workforce. You stand out because you don't just sound like a person with all these different parts. If you watched the other day, I had Courtney on, she said it the best. She said, finding your hybridity is like finding your spice blend. You have all these spices in the drawer, but you're picking just certain ones to combine them. And boom, you have this amazing, unique blend, and that's you. And that is what hybrids do in their work. They bring in art and science and coding and all these different backgrounds. And you're like, what does that person do? And that's just it. They're a hybrid and they defy traditional labels. So let's unpack this. Today, my guest is Linda Kong, and I'm really excited to dive into her story. So without further ado, we're going to get started. Welcome, Linda. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too.
So forgive me if I talk too fast. That's what happens when I'm really excited.
Well, then you're in the right place. I think your energy will come through. It always feels good to have people that are like, let's get started. Well, tell us where you're coming in from today.
I'm coming in from Montreal, Canada.
Fabulous.
So bonjour.
Oh, bonjour. I think you're my first international guest, so that's super.
Oh, I'm honored.
So Linda, the way I like to kick this off is using that pervasive social question that is everywhere when we network. What do you do? And that question's loaded. So give us your elevator pitch. What do you do, Linda?
Wow. Okay. And that's where I'm trying to get to it, is my elevator pitch. Okay. So it's just as bad as tell me about yourself in those interview questions. So right now, I in a very generic, a general job title, I'm an e-commerce director. Okay. Now that entails a lot of different skills and backgrounds and experiences and results from that. I've done site merchandising. I've done managing teams of clients, service reps. I've worked in B2B, B2C. I've worked in Fortune 500 companies all the way to startups as well.
Okay.
So just a broad range. I mean, I don't know where to start because I can go off on a tangent. I could be very broad. I could be very specific into the weeds. And this is why I am here.
This is why I want you to be here. This question always gave me anxiety because I felt like I had to change it depending on where I was and who I was talking to. And just to your point, you were trying to explain, well, I have background in this and I've worked over here. Oh, and then there's this part of me too. And you want to show all these sides of you because they're important to you, but you also don't know how to make it make sense. And I think that is such a common struggle. And I'm guilty of this too. It's like, I don't know how to explain what I do because I'm really good at a lot of things. And so that's where I like to start because it is this thing that I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, and especially when you wear a lot of hats. So you started with the title or identity of being, I think you said, an e-commerce director. Do I have that right? Yeah. And you're right. That means that funnels into so many different disciplines and cross-functional work. So how long have you been doing this? Where did you start? Give us a little bit of the backstory.
So I've been in e-commerce for over 10 years. When it was just basically just starting out, and I started off at Walmart.com, which is a great training ground for e-commerce. Not only do they have a big budget for resources and platforms, so I got exposure to all that, and then after Walmart, I then worked at smaller companies, right? I mean, everybody else is going to be smaller. So with that said, with the training I got from Walmart, I was able to use that and apply it to what these companies had. So I like to think that, I know you use the word unpack, there's a lot to unpack here. And I like to think of it as a suitcase. So every company that I've gone to has a certain suitcase they give me. You know, there's a certain size, there's a limited number of resources, limited number of time, tech platforms. And so that's what I work with. Like there's limited stuff in there in a suitcase, but then there's an infinite number of ways to use what you got in that suitcase. And that's where I feel I bring value, is the way I approach the suitcase with my team. And that's why that's why I'm drawn to clothing that's like, you can wear clothing like 10 different ways. Reversible clothing, gadgets that you could do two things, like you can blend the chops, those are the kind of things that for some reason I'm just totally drawn to. Like Transformers, like, oh, it's a car. No, and then it's a robot. So I feel like these are the things that I bring to the table. Is like I like to transform things with what I got, which is usually working inside the box, not outside the box, but inside the box.
Interesting.
And helping my team understand that, like, yeah, we can complain that the tech is like, so 20th century, but let's use what we can do with it, because this is what we got to use. So I also like to think of it as a makeover artist. Makeover artist. This is my face. This is the kind of makeup I got. So what can you do with this?
Right. That's your
before and after. So I love seeing those before and after pictures, and that's what I feel like with me. If you bring me to your team, to your company, you're going to see a distinct difference between before and after. So
that is a great tagline for you. I'm glad we're recording this so you can rewatch it later. About you are the before and after transformational artist or something. There's something in there. Yeah, I was hearing that. And when you're doing this unpacking and making over, is it always within e-commerce? Like, what is the scope and boundary of sort of the zone that you like to apply this to? Because there's thousands of industries and marketplaces.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The reason why this has become more and more important for me to identify my hybridity is that I've now just started seriously looking to go back to work.
Okay.
And the e-commerce field, as many of you guys have known, is growing. And there's more and more e-commerce managers, e-commerce directors.
Yes.
So there's more competition for these particular roles. And so this is why I really want to really hone in on the value that I bring, so I could stand out from the other e-commerce directors. Totally. And with that said, there's also another particular role that I'd like to transition over or give it a try. I mean, I don't know if it's giving it a try, but I feel that I would also be a good fit is customer success manager for software companies. So instead of selling physical goods now, I want to focus on selling digital goods. And I find I don't think the transition is that earth shattering, but again, this is part of my pitch. How do I tell the HR person that what I bring to the table can easily be transitioned over to the customer success management area?
These are great questions. So, okay, let's go there in your own language. Let's unpack this a little bit, right? Because the hybridity is about understanding all the different parts of yourself in your work first. And I always try and hold space that identity, first of all, is a spectrum. We have social and personal identities and professional ones. And so the space that I work in is just what you do in your work, whatever identities are showing up the most there. The social and personal are always part of you, but you don't always put them on your resume. So that's the container of identities we focus on. And e-commerce to you sounds, I love how you're like, I work in this box. I know what the tools are there, what the palette is, but then there's infinite possibilities. And I think that's the combination of your identities too. The way, once you know these fundamental pieces of yourself, then you can recombine them to work in client success, to work in different, parts of a business. So let's go there and break down your different parts. I think you mentioned you had seen, I have a professional identity word list.
Yes. And I've been following you for some time.
And it's all written all over. I love the scribbles. By the way, how did you hear about that? Do you remember when you first?
Yeah, I actually do. I was interested in working as a freelancer. And so I went to Upwork and they have a lot of really great webinars for freelancers. And your webinar came up and I was like, this is really interesting. Hybridity? What is that?
That's awesome.
I think that's me.
Ta-da! You found it. Yeah, that was a great webinar. Well, so that is a resource that is one of my favorites that people get a lot of quick thinking from. It's inspirational. And what that resource is for people that haven't seen it, I don't know, there's over 100 words, I'm just taking a guess, that are identity words that we may or may not have thought to give to ourselves or think about ourselves these ways before. Because we do get stuck in our own boxes of like, okay, e-commerce director, okay, head of sales, okay, coder, okay, designer, that's it. And truthfully, all kinds of words can be identities like navigator and guide and perseverer. And like you can just turn actions into identities that are truer and more accurate to you. So I know you've gone through that word list and you started pulling out new words that you're like, I think these are showing up in my work. And you've shared a couple already, but why don't you share a few more to give us a flavor of what you're thinking of from this word list?
Okay, sure. I highlighted simplifier, silo buster. Let's see, what else do I have here? Activator and blender, arranger, optimizer, organizer. Although my title is, of course, e-commerce director, I think of it more as a director of a movie set, let's say, right? If you think about it, it's all chaotic in the background as the director is like, take action, scene one, take one, action. And then, everyone's running around, the actors are saying their parts. But at the end of the day, the audience doesn't know that all this chaos was taking place. What they see is a beautiful website that they can easily find what they want, add stuff to the cart, and then check out right away. And then within a few days, voila, their product that they thought they bought arrives. And they're happy with it.
Magic.
And then we get great ratings. I mean, that's how I see myself as a director, more of like a movie set that way.
So one thing I play with too in this hybrid work is thinking of analogies for yourself. And you are really good at doing that already. I don't know if you've noticed. You've used the transformer, the action figure about you. You've talked about a makeover artist, which that's from a whole different industry. But you're like, yeah, Sarabeth, I'm not making over people. I'm making over these products and systems. And then what was the last one you just shared?
Silo buster or... Oh, you mean the director part?
The director one. Thank you. My brain was trying to hold all that together. So analogies really help us see ourselves and adapt ideas from other places to things we're doing that may not be in our industry, but it's the similar concepts. So I love that you already have those analogies going in your mind. And when I start with this work, what I've noticed a lot when I ask people, what do you do? And they literally go on a little bit of a tangent, a ramble on, I do this and this and this and this. But it's about, do they know their core identities of them? So for me, I found that true to me, I always need to be the artist, researcher, educator, and designer. Those became my 4 core identities. And what the differentiator is of a core identity in your work versus all the identities that you show up with, because I also do event management, some website design, and my own accounting and things like that. But those aren't my core ones. So these core identities, which we'll look at from your list in a second to unpack that further, these are the ones that you love. They are your truest expertise. You want to use them every day. They have a very high frequency of showing up for you, where all these other identities on the list, they're sort of occasional and less frequent. They're still important, but they're not the make or break. Like if someone told you, Linda, you can't be the makeover artist anymore, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's okay. But if it's primary and core to you, you'd be like, no, 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 no. Like that is just who I am. I have to use that. So does that help you see? Can you start looking at that list differently and think which identities are truly the ones that show up the most and make me feel this alive?
That's okay. Definitely optimizer.
I love that.
Because whatever I'm getting, I'm just going to make it better.
Yeah.
Optimize it as much as I can.
Yeah.
So that don't take that away from me.
Don't take that from Linda.
Let's see. Oh, I didn't say detangler. I think I'm a good detangler, like which is synonymous with, I guess, simplifier.
I like both of those for you.
Simplify the concepts because it'll help bust out the silos, which is another one I like to say, silo buster. I can come up with many stories in my head about times where I've worked with several different departments. There's always that tension between retail stores and online.
Yeah, I bet.
So I was able to bust out the kind of invisible wall that's between those two channels. I mean, with always the true north of like, we got to do what's right for the customer.
Yeah, yeah.
Bar none. So always thinking as the customer myself.
So maybe that's even an identity that we need to reveal about you, is that you have this customer-centricness about you. We need to make that more of an identity word, but if that's always part of who you are and what you're doing, then we need to name that, right? Do you have a thought that comes to your mind on that one?
Yeah, the channeler? No,
channeler. Yeah.
No, it sounds kind of weird.
No, it's okay. We're playing. This is
we're playing. Like I feel like I have a duality. Like I can see both perspectives from a customer and a supplier side, from a product management perspective and a user side. So duality.
A perspective shifter, even I'm hearing in that.
Okay.
Yeah. So since we're doing this live, this is more of, taste test. And I'm giving the audience a sense of how to start looking at themselves too. And I don't want to put too much pressure on you to get this right in this moment. But essentially, this is part of the process, right? Like step 1 is really asking, well, who am I? Like listing all of the different identities that are coming up for you in your work. Because even that, I've noticed people don't stop and just take inventory of themselves. And with that list in front of you, it gives you more creative thinking about different identities you have that you haven't used in a list before. So I think this brainstorm of all the possibilities of Linda in your work is really important. And as you're noticing, as we're working together, language is really coming up a lot. You're like the simplifier or the optimizer, or I'm doing this, I'm listening to customers and clients. And you're shifting, and then suddenly we found a perspective shifter as an identity in that moment. So it's about reflecting on what you're doing and then saying, is there an identity there? And sometimes that's where the next identity idea comes from. So building this big brainstorm list is really the first part of the work. And then, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's narrowing it down. It's reducing that list to really the 2, 3, or 4 that are your primary, the ones you use every day and make you feel the most energized. And the reason I give that range of 2 to 4 is to be a hybrid, you have to be combining at least 2 identities, right? That's where an intersection is.
Yeah.
And 3 is sort of the sweet spot. I draw Venn diagrams at this point. I have 2 circles, 1 identity in each one. And what is that overlapping space? That's your hybridity. But if you have 3 primary identities, you need a Venn diagram of 3. And 4 primary identities becomes a bigger Venn diagram. There's many intersections in that. So really, we're not able to handle more than about 4 in a moment. It gets super complex. So that's why that's sort of the sweet spot. Now, once you've identified these core and primary identities, you were already starting to do it naturally. You said, I can think of all these memories where the silo buster was showing up. That's great. We start to do a memory deep dive on actual very, 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 very specific moments in your work. Because I'll say, tell me about a time when you were being the silo buster. And people are like, oh, I run meetings and that's when it happens. That's too general, right? You've got to find really specific moments where you're like, okay, I was meeting with these 5 people. It was 2 years ago. We were sitting in my office and I remember Joe said this and Ann said that. And suddenly I said blank, blank, blank. And you can remember it verbatim. And in that moment, you were being a silo buster, because that specificity helps us unpack even more detail. Because what we're looking for in those stories where you are feeling an identity is in the moments where you're working is just kind of out of flow, you're in that zone, your hybridity is really alive and active. Other identities are also surfacing simultaneously. So we might see the silo buster in that moment and also say, Linda, what else was happening in that amazing meeting? And you'd go, Sarabeth, I was also transforming and I was also optimizing. And we'd go, great. That's a moment where we can see your hybridity is happening. And now, who are you truly in that moment? And we start to go deeper. And that's where new language, which helps us create a hybrid title for you, really starts to surface. So in my own example, I draw my Venn diagram with the artist and the educator and the researcher and the designer. And I traced back memories where I was feeling amazing, like some achievement, some project was just going so well. And I noticed in that moment, I was pushing boundaries and I was being really creative and I was testing things and I was saying things that kind of pushed people a little off kilter. And that's where I started to realize I'm disrupting in these moments when I'm at my hybrid state. I am a creative disruptor. That's how I got to my hybrid title. So that's a really succinct little nugget of how this process works. But I think that gives you a little bit of a hint of where you're trying to go with that. What does that make you think of, Linda, as you're listening?
Wow, that I still, it's really about storytelling then. So I really need to get my stories clarified in my mind. It's really definitely food for thought. I can't do it now, but I mean, I'm going to do it because I am an action taker.
It's a journey. Yeah. This is a process that I don't want people to rush. I think if we did it in the next 5 minutes, it just would feel awful. It's like too many things for your brain to unpack. But I think it's really important work because this is identity work. And identity is the stories we tell ourselves and the stories people tell of us, which then becomes your personal brand. So all of this flows. And then that helps when you're doing a career change or trying to apply to jobs for people to make sense of you, right? If you know your true stories and how they represent you at your essence, your hybridity, then you suddenly really make sense. People are like, oh my gosh, Linda, we really need you because you are able to be so clear about the value you bring and why you stand out. One little hint, I'll give this as another way to help you get to these stories. When you're looking at these stories, right, it's about finding your uniqueness. That's essentially what we're trying to go after. But if I just ask Linda, where are you unique? What do you do? What would your response be to me?
Right now?
Like, how do you figure out where you're unique? I'm just curious.
Well, based on what I would say, now I'm going to use the makeover transform websites so that people want to engage with them and transact with them. Oh, and I do it with
Got a little pause here.
Oh, sorry.
Miss Linda, she's coming back. Linda, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, there's a little freeze.
Okay.
You were telling me about the makeover artist transforming websites.
Yeah, I mean, I think now I would use that word more often, transforming with whatever resources I'm giving to something optimal, that's something that customers would want to engage with, and ultimately at the end of the day, transact.
One more little blip there.
Oh, am I blipping again?
Holding.
I'll put this a few moments later. Am I back?
Okay, we'll try one more time.
All right, one more time. Take three.
Take three.
So I transform websites. I transform websites so that people would want to engage with them and ultimately transact with them. But then I don't feel that makes me that unique, because I believe other e-commerce directors are doing this.
So this is, I was using you a little bit as a guinea pig. The point.
Oh, now you're freezing.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
We're gonna get through this part.
Yeah, the computer can't handle it. There's too much action, too much things being said.
Oh my gosh. The point I was trying to make is this: when you directly ask somebody, "What makes you unique?" you freeze, right? It's like, I don't know. Like, you're so caught off guard. It's really hard to answer in the moment. And so I put you on the spot, and intentionally I apologize about that. But I like to use tools to back into it to make it softer and easier to get there.
Okay.
So I have a framework I call the first, best, and only. And this is a tool you can reflect on later, Linda, where you look for stories in your work history where you were the first, best, or only at something. Because if you're the first, you're the only one, right? You were the first to do it. That makes you unique. If you're the best, it could be the top 5, the top 20. It could be on a team, a company. It could be in a region. You get to decide the boundaries. But the best also shows like you're one of a few that can do this, and only one of a kind, right? There is no one else that does it. So some of your stories might be, I was the first to launch this new product with a website that looked like this. And you can get really tight on the metrics, the achievements, like we reached 1,000 people in 40 days and this happened. And that helps encapsulate why this was such a unique moment for you. So first, best, and only, when you can find a few of those, you start to see trends and patterns in yourself, because those are all different moments and data points of your uniqueness showing up. And then in my framework, your uniqueness is aligned to your hybridity, because when you're combining these disparate parts of yourself into new forms that we don't know what to call yet, right? Because that's the trick of hybridity. It's new. There's no language for it. If you look at your uniqueness, you're finding signals of your hybridity, and then you can start to see the themes that are happening, and you can name it. And that's where the disruptor came for me. The creative disruptor is based on patterns across my career history. I can trace it back to my first job out of college, where I was creatively pushing things and didn't realize it. So that's why the hybrid title not only becomes your unique identifier, where you're like, I'm Linda, I've been an e-commerce director, right? But I also consider myself this makeover artist, something. And suddenly your story starts to crystallize of this picture, why you are different than all the other e-commerce directors. And you can trace it back and start to show how all your different work accomplishments map together, so that your story makes sense. You have this common thread of why you have so many different parts and different traits that are really what make you the best and why you're the right person for the job. That's how I'm seeing this work all connect together. What do you think about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you said that, I could think of something like right away. I was the first to launch a US website for a Canadian jewelry company.
Awesome.
In record time with no marketing. And we just from launching it on day one, we had incremental sales of 8%.
Wow.
And now, yeah, and I had so many other departments. I think part of my secret sauce, I guess, was I was able to be inclusive and include all these departments that normally they were telling me. They took me aside after the meeting and said, you know what? Normally, when the product is about, or when the site is about to launch, or any initiative is about to launch, we are brought in like 2 days before it launches. And they identify some other issues,
Sure.
and then it's too late to pivot or to adjust. So
right. And part of that story is your aftermath, right? Like that's the impact part of like you're very inclusive in that process, and you hit record time. And to back into how you got there, it's who were you in that moment to achieve that first launch, right? Like what identities were you using aside from your job title, e-commerce director? You were Linda, the transformer, optimizer, makeover artist, something. Silo buster. And if those, now here's the test to validate, those identities need to keep showing up in all your other examples of your first, best, and only. They can't keep changing. So when you find your core professional identities, they're consistent across your first, best, and onlys. That's why they're core to you. And then it all starts to really support evidence behind this is your truth. This is your truest professional self. Okay.
My mind is being blown right now. I just okay. Yeah, so I mean, this is great, like when it comes to interviews, but like I was also like, noticing that applicant tracking systems, they're like totally dry, and I feel like there's a lot of false negatives in there in their algorithms, but I guess that's another discussion.
I mean, the headline on that, right, is we're still in a very binary world that is keyword heavy. And so your hybridity is about your storytelling, and it is very human, and it works the best in cover letters and things that are human interaction, interviews, and networking. But what you're probably already noticing, or maybe I'll just draw your attention to it, you have just created a word bank, I call it, of keywords that are very important to how you do your work. So the things like the optimizer, the transformer, the silo buster. Now, those might not always be perfect fits in LinkedIn for like how they're creating your skills. But as you do more of this reflection and find more of your personal keywords about your hybridity, those can then influence, hey, I'm not talking about how I'm a really good navigator or process person. That skill needs to be in my cover letter, resume, LinkedIn, so that you're actually making sure the truth about your hybridity is reflected in skills that you might be tracked on or measured on in, internet automated spaces, if that makes sense. So there is some of that conversion of who you are into like the technology landscape of how you're being looked at. But yeah, it's another question. We can totally have another LinkedIn on that.
Yeah.
Linda, I love that I blew your mind, first of all. That's a moment I personally am like, yay, because there's a lot here. And I think this work is big, and it's the foundation that if you're trying to go pitch yourself, promote yourself, find a new job, whatever, you've got to know who you are. And we don't talk about identity, professional identity enough. We talk about, how are you writing your professional summary, or how are you prepared it with your personal brand? But identity is really at the top part of that stream. So thank you for going on this journey with me today as someone who's emerging in this, right? Like you're learning your hybridity, and you can see this is deep work, right? There's a lot here to really dial in and also reflect on. So do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
I just want to thank you for sharing your gift of being a creative disruptor to others.
Thank you.
I also want to thank the audience for spending their time watching this, or whether it's live or recorded. Thank you for your time. I don't know. I just got a lot of work cut out for me. It's really about the reflection, like you said. I really need to sit down and just keep reflecting and keep having your voice. So what do you mean by that? Can you tell me more? Yeah, I have to keep that perspective shifting, like, okay, now I'm Sarabeth, and then now I'm, Linda.
Well, Linda, first of all, how can our audience find you? If they want to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to look for you?
Oh, I would say just on my LinkedIn profile, Linda Kong, Kong, like King Kong.
Perfect.
And yeah, we could take it from there if anyone wants to reach out to me.
Okay. And then also for the audience, I'm doing weekend crash courses now for this exact reason of how do I get Sarabeth's voice in my head and my own voice? That's a lot of work. So I am doing more moments where I get to work with people as a group to go through this process and really see and collaborate and reflect collectively, because I think the power is in everyone mirroring language and being like, oh, in that moment, I heard that you're actually the circus performer or something, like new language comes up as people listen to your stories, and it helps us make sense of ourselves, which then dials in our hybridity and then dials in all the other things we're trying to do, the promotion, the networking, the personal brand. So morethanmytitle.com is, I'm going to put up my little banner where people can find me and follow me. And I have books and resources. Linda mentioned the word list, and that's one of many tools. So Linda, I would love to gift you a workbook because you've been part of my LinkedIn Live today, and I'll be sending that to you offline. Thank you.
Oh, I can't wait.
I really enjoyed getting to hear more about you, and I'm so excited. You are using awesome language already, and I just want to make sure you capture that so you can see it for yourself.
All right. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be doing more of these, or I'll be doing more of these with future guests every week. So reach out to me if you'd like to be included, and everyone have a great day. Bye, Linda. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.